Hello and welcome to Board of It. I'm Farrell, this is Tally.
Hello.
And today we are reviewing the standalone spin-off to Wingspan, Wyrmspan. For 1 to 5 players, Wyrmspan is a game where you try and entice all shapes and sizes of dragons into some caves you found in your property somewhere. Unfortunately, it's not about collecting worms in top hats, as Tally thought. Better luck next time, Tally.
I'm absolutely gutted. Mechanistically, Wyrmspan is heavily based on Wingspan, but with a few new twists and turns, and dare we say it, a bit more bite. Before we get into the how to play section, we should just note that we were very kindly provided this review copy by the publisher Stonemaier Games. There are 4 rounds in Wyrmspan, with each player taking a variable number of actions per round before everyone passes. There are 3 possible actions in the game, and they are excavate, entice, and explore. You have a player mat with spaces on which you can play cards, which represent dragons of various sizes. However, your player mat, which is your habitat, is unfinished. It's full of tunnels and caves which need to be excavated before they can be home to any dragons. So you can take the excavate action and play a cave card to those spaces in order to make room for the dragons, and when you play a cave card they'll also give you an instant bonus. Then you can take the entice action to entice some dragons, which is playing dragon cards onto those spaces that have the cave cards. And the dragons have a variety of abilities which occur at different times when played, between rounds, end of game, or when explored. Finally, you have the explore action, which lets you move your explorer meeple along one of your 3 caves. And the more dragons you have in a cave, the further they can travel. Each one of the 3 cave types will allow you to gain different resources, i.e. dragon cards, cave cards, and food, essentially replacing the gain food, lay eggs, and draw cards actions from Wingspan. However, some of the dragons have abilities that are triggered when the explorer moves over them, so it really allows you to build up the actions in a way that you want and modify what you gain. Each of the 3 caves, when you do explore, also allows you to move along the Dragon Guild track, which is a circular track which gets you some bonuses at every step, and at certain points gets you some powerful one-time boons and endgame scoring.
Looping back, there are a variable number of turns in each round of Wingspan because the turns are determined by how many coins you have. And let me just say, these are probably the best cardboard coins I've seen in a board game. And I know the B-roll doesn't really do them justice because it doesn't pick it up, but they are kind of shiny. They just look really silvery and really cool. Now, you're going to get 6 coins at the beginning of each round, and every action you take costs 1 coin. And sometimes dragons also require a coin as part of their cost. On top of that, you're able to gain more coins through clever play. And usually most rounds you'll be able to, once you're familiar with the game, get 1 or 2 more coins. Then you're going to, at the end of each round, score for the end of round objective. Works the same as in Wingspan, you know, things like the most large dragons or the most eggs on player boards, and then you rank people 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. Importantly, the ties are friendly here, which does away with my biggest problem of Wingspan, that you had all these people jammed up on one place and it was real hassle to divide everything. So after 4 rounds, you're going to do final scoring, and you score for all the stuff you'd expect: eggs, tucked cards, cached food, dragons, the Dragon Guild, etc. So I'm sure there are a lot of questions about Wyrmspan. I don't think any of us were expecting this, but we'll just begin with the theme, which is a little bit weird because it's both pasted on and also they go kind of really hard into it at the same time. So with the pasted on side, there's only like a small blurb in the rulebook that sets up what's going on and ties the theme to the mechanisms. So there is probably about as pasted on as Wingspan was. But then they go really hard into the dragons with all of these unique dragon cards with lovely artwork and unique names. And there's even a booklet of dragon facts. And that's all it exists to do. It's just a book as big or bigger than the rulebook full of dragon facts about each individual dragon, which is a lot of effort. What we will say though is that the theme definitely grew on us, and in particular Tally, as we played more and more. And I think a key aspect of that was seeing more and more of the dragons and just kind of experiencing them. They're very cute, they're very interesting. I think that lent to you kind of getting more on board.
I think they're so cute. Yes, however, like us, we're sure more people are actually interested in the actual gameplay. So first thing to note, at least for us, Wyrmspan was really a grower. We sat down for our first and second games and we thought it was pretty good, but a bit nonplussed. We felt like the rhythm wasn't quite as smooth and the combos were a bit less interesting. But by games 3, 4 and 5, it really started to click. We were creating a lot more powerful combinations and it really got under our skin. We realized we had to kind of unlearn Wingspan in a way and just kind of take this a bit as a game in its own right, which of course it is. But yeah, we found ourselves thinking about it even in our off time and saying to each other, Wyrmspan, Wyrmspan.
Wyrmspan.
Couldn't wait to get it back to the table. And as we got to grips with it and got to grips with the cadence, we were creating more intricate combinations and everything was just flowing a lot better. So by the end, we really, really enjoy this game. We do think there's a small barrier to entry here. People who have maybe played a lot of Wingspan might struggle because of that change of pace. More importantly, Wyrmspan is a tighter game. It's a small step up in difficulty, but it is a noticeable one. To be fair, that difficulty doesn't come from complexity, but more because of the difficulty in getting the resources you need to play the cards you want. In the first few games, and until you learn to play the system, it can feel a bit frustrating to struggle to play those cards and to be able to get what you want. However, this is a game where you'll get noticeably better each game you play until after a few games, you'll be overflowing with resources and able to create crazy combos. It's at that point that Wyrmspan becomes quite rewarding. It's really fulfilling to cultivate the different areas on your player mat and fill them with dragons full of interesting abilities. The explore action in itself also providing some pretty interesting decisions, because maybe you want to play a dragon that has a when explored ability, because you can take advantage of that over and over. But is it smarter to actually play this other dragon, which only has end of game scoring, because ultimately it's only victory points that matter? Found ourselves considering far more here which dragons to play than we ever did with the birds in Wingspan, because perhaps there it was more about, did that bird fit with your personal or end of round objectives, and if not, tuck it or spend it. So we're far more interested now in the abilities of the dragons and how they can help you create these different combinations on a game-to-game basis. An example of this would be the hatchlings, a special type of dragon. They're interesting because they typically provide minimal VP, but they offer you ways to build up VP, usually by caching food or tucking cards. For example, they might say something like, when you explore this dragon, cache a meat. When you cache a meat, gain another type of resource. And when the third meat is cached, go up 2 on the Dragon Guild track. They represent a really interesting long-term investment because they only provide their best VP value or bonuses after repeated explorations and visits. If you get a few of them and you line them up correctly, you can create some really powerful combinations. Or you could ignore the hatchlings entirely and go down some other route, and that's the beauty of Wyrmspan. Another thing we really like about Wyrmspan is how there's different routes to getting the resources that you need. Meaning, with a bit of clever thinking, you can almost always eke out the required resources and also get some goodies along the way. The explore action is the most straightforward way of getting resources, but the when played dragon cards, the cave cards and the Dragon Guild track also provide resources and bonuses. One game, you might set yourself up to be whizzing around the Dragon Guild track, raking in those resources and bonuses that way. But in another game, you might set yourself up to have some really powerful explore actions and be raking them in that way. It makes you feel really clever as a player to spin out your original 6 starting coins into 10 coins, doing almost double what you thought you could do at the beginning of the round, and creating those really powerful combinations that set you up for the next round.
Wyrmspan is great, at giving you reasons to get it back to the table again and again. And we can begin with all of these dragon cards. I think there's over 180 different ones. They're all unique, and it's a real joy to discover them. And we've played 7+ games, we're still encountering new ones. As a little aside, one thing I didn't like about the production of Wyrmspan was in Wingspan, you had a plastic container which held all of those cards. Here, you don't have that, and thus it's more difficult in terms of storing the cards. It's a bit more finicky and tedious, and it's something that was really missed. And probably they did this to reduce the environmental footprint, less plastic. Then it kind of leaves me unhappy because they still do what we call the Stonemaier gift of the 20 plastic bags that you don't need in every box.
Getting back to the point, you have different dragon guilds, each one having a different focus, different ways of scoring, and different bonuses to gain, which can help you shape up your dragon habitats. Plus, you have the end of round screwing objectives, which are pretty standard, not too exciting, but they do drive players to focus on specific things. We have found that each play of Wyrmspan does present a different challenge, and it has been really fun to experiment with the different combinations and mechanisms.
So a common problem with this type of game is randomness, because it's so heavily card-based. And getting the best synergies and really comboing things together can depend on what you pull out of the deck or what's available at a given time. And in Wyrmspan, this is a noticeable problem because the in-game economy is so tight. If you don't get the right synergies and cards coming out, you could struggle to play one dragon while your opponent sits there and does 12 actions because they've managed to get 6 coins into 12 within a single round, taking almost double the actions you do. And generally, what this means is that when you play and things are going right and you kind of combo everything together and synergize, you feel so much more accomplished and impressed with yourself than you ever did in Wingspan. But the opposite of that is that when things aren't going right, when you're not getting the right cards, when you're pulling things you can't use, you feel so much more frustrated because it is a harder game mechanically. What exacerbates this problem is the imbalance in the cards. The cave cards are where I have a problem because they're quite clearly not balanced. One will give you 3 eggs, the other will give you a dragon card and a food. So already on the first one, you're getting more stuff. And if you don't use those eggs, it's 3 points at the end of the game, and they're a hard to get resource. Whereas the other 2 are common resources, and if you don't use them at the end of the game, it's worth halfway to a point. Quite clearly, not balanced, but they have their usefulness depending on the situation you're in. Then you get to the real problem and the real frustration, which is cards where you're required to pay something to get something. And considering that like most of the deck is giving you something for free, it feels a little bit weird. And in a game this tight, it can be a little bit frustrating if these end up clogging your hand with ones where you have to pay to get something. For example, sure, it's great to pay 3 food to move 3 times on the Dragon Guild, but there are cards that let you move twice on the Dragon Guild for free. So it's like, Then the worst offenders are ones that might be like pay 2 dragon cards to flip the top card of the cave deck and play it for free. So you don't know what you're going to get. It might be exactly the same type of card where you don't get any reward from it, or it might give you something completely useless. So you're discarding hard-earned resources for something of very unknown value. It's not that they're never useful, and it's not that will never have a situation where you might be like, this is exactly what I want. The problem is it's so situational, you have to do so much in preparation compared to the others, that it just comes across very strange in a game this tight and this much about eking out what you can with the limited resources you have. All that said, one element we really enjoy about Wyrmspan is something it does to help you control all that randomness, and that is it lets you draft your starting setup. You're given 3 dragon cards and 3 cave cards, and you keep 4 of them, whichever way you want. And on top of that, you also get 3 resources of food in any which way you want them. And it means you have interesting decisions on how you're going to start, how you're going to build your combos, and it lets you do it your way. And I find myself doing different things in different games. You know, one game, I might get some good cave cards that give me a bunch of resources. So I play all those, build up the resources, and then see what I can do with them. Others, I might have dragons that give me good explore actions when I can explore over them. So then I build a big row of those and I kind of rake in the resources that way. It keeps things different and interesting.
So, final thoughts. We found Wyrmspan to have quite the edge to it. It made us far more competitive than Wingspan ever did, and the tighter economy has really tested our combo building brains. We think it's fair to say that the highs are higher when things fall into place, but the lows can be lower when you struggle, which may lead to frustration on the odd occasion.
It's probably more of a grower than any game we've ever played. The more we played, the more we appreciated it, the more we liked it, the more we got to grips with it. And honestly, it's more of a gamer's Wingspan, if you will. Mm-hmm. And as such, it probably is my preferred version. Now, in terms of its relation to Wingspan, it's a little bit in the area that Great Western Trail New Zealand or Great Western Trail Argentina is to Great Western Trail. Basically, a game that does stand alone on its own, that some people who really enjoy the original or this version, they might want to own both. But a lot of people are not going to find it necessary to have both.
Yeah.
However, honestly, this has really grown on me, and it's a bit of a weird one for us because we played it a lot last year, but we couldn't talk about it because of the embargo.
Yeah.
And it honestly might have had a place, or probably would have had a place in my top 10 of last year, I reckon. That's how much I've enjoyed it. So with that, we'll conclude our review of Wyrmspan, and we hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, please let us know. We're happy to answer them. And if this was helpful, please consider subscribing so we can keep growing the channel and bring you more reviews. Thanks a lot. See ya.
Bye.